Like, I would have to have a lobotomy in order for that to be my choice. Well, unfortunately, Rachel, there's no such thing as a vice senator, and only one could win. And last night, despite Jasmine Crockett whining about election fraud and pulling a last-minute legal challenge out of her head, Tallarico prevailed. Crockett's role on the national stage likely over, at least for now. And I have to say, she will be missed. Who else in moments like these?
We are going to be in your face. We are going to be on your asses. We're going to make sure you understand what democracy looks like. Donald Trump is a piece of shit. Okay, we know that.
When I first became a public defender, I had no criminal defense experience. And I walked in and I told my boss, I said, listen, you should hire me. He said, why? I said, because I'm black.
So I go around the country and educate people about what immigrants do for this country. The fact is, ain't none of y'all trying to go and farm right now. You're not. We done picking cotton.
If someone on this committee then starts talking about somebody's bleach blonde, bad built butch body, that would not be engaged personalities, correct? I know that there was a time and a place, and if they could, they would throw me back in chains.
If you could tell Donald Trump anything tonight, what would you tell him?
Stop being Putin's hawk now. I am tired of the white tears.
If you could speak directly to Elon Musk, what would you say?
Fuck off.
As somebody who understands history, when I see ICE, I see slave patrols.
Violence doesn't come from Democrats, just to be clear. I mean, obviously anyone can be a criminal, but it is MAGA.
They expect Democrats to kind of be the guys that we are. Well, I am here to tell you, not only are we going to punch back, but we about to beat you down.
I've got to be honest. She's about minutes away from getting a show on the weekend at MSNBC. That's clearly where life is going now. Her House seat was basically all but eliminated, but she left it anyway, no longer hers. And she didn't make it in the Democrat primary. It's like she lost in the general. She couldn't even get through the Democrat primary in her home state of Texas, so that's done. So yeah, I'm thinking given the love that was on the set by Rachel and Nicole, you know, maybe one of them will be willing to give up their spot for a black woman in America. Isn't that what you're supposed to do? White privilege, ladies, move aside. Jasmine Crockett needs a job. Or maybe they'll just give her Tiffany Cross's old show, which I think ran on the weekend. Tiffany Cross then later got fired, for either misstating her finances on her accounting or just being a general racist. Same with Joy Reid. The latter, the explanation in her case, quite obviously. And so they're looking for somebody. And why not Jasmine Crockett? Let's see what happens there. Now, Tallarico, a white Christian male. Nothing wrong with that, but Democrats, it is. There is something wrong with that if you're a Democrat. However, they were willing to take the risk because they apparently thought that this was their best chance to win in red Texas. Get a white guy, somebody said. Oh, and a Christian. Okay, that'll do it. That's all you need. White Christian man. We're going to win. But I'm not sure how comments like this one are going to play in the Lone Star State. Take a listen to Tallarico in January of this year.
So what I said is that our southern border should be like our front porch. There should be a giant welcome mat out front and a lock on the door. We can welcome immigrants who live the American dream. We can build a pathway to citizenship for those neighbors who have been here, making us richer and stronger, and we can keep out people who mean to do us harm.
He's in trouble. And his interpretation of scripture, I mean, it might not connect with your average Texas voter. Check out this from 2021.
The first two lines of the Bible, the first two lines in Genesis, use two different Hebrew words to describe God. One is the masculine Hebrew noun for divinity. The second is the feminine Hebrew noun for spirit. God is both masculine and feminine and everything in between. God is non-binary.
Oh, my Lord. Tallarico will take on either incumbents John Cornyn or Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, who are headed for a runoff to be decided on May 26th. Tallarico is not the only Faced white dude Democrat in the news today, however. President Joe Biden's transportation secretary, Pete Buttigieg, is profiled now in The Atlantic with the title, Pete Buttigieg in the Wilderness. Quote, he has a beard, a splitting maul, which I had to look up. It's a tool that actually is used for splitting wood or attacking people, and a house in Michigan. Is that enough to convince America that he's a man of the people? Okay, we're going to go with a big no there, because all I see when I see Pete Buttigieg is I remember Tucker Carlson's joke about him breastfeeding his babies. It was a joke. He was making fun of just how much feminine energy Pete Buttigieg has. And that's not a reference to him being gay. It's a reference to him being femme and soft and just kind of a P word. I'm sorry, but that's kind of what he projects. Not tough guy, like elite, liberal, effete Democrat, notwithstanding his beard now and his splitting maul. It's one of the many challenges he's going to be up against. But these are the men that Democrats fall in love with. I mean, truly, this is their ideal when it comes to what a real man is. I mean, in Texas, you're going to go with a guy who says the border's like the front porch? What? In Texas, you're going to go with a guy who's non-binary for God, that God is non-binary? Like, I don't know how much it's going to take for them to learn, but I'm certainly going to enjoy watching as they... Here to react to all this and more is the first guest in the history of the MK Show, Glenn Greenwald, our official godfather. He is a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist, that's right, and host of System Update, which can now be found on Substack at greenwald.substack.com, along with his written work. Don't miss a moment. Subscribe to this show on YouTube and follow me on Insta, Facebook, and X. Think about this. In 2006, $20 equaled roughly 33 ounces of gold at spot price. Okay, 20,000 bucks got you 33 ounces. At today's prices, those 33 ounces would be worth about $165,000. That would have been a very good investment. And that's why so many smart Americans do diversify a portion of their savings into precious metals. They're thinking about what's going to happen next 20 years. And it's also why you should consider buying gold from Birch Gold Group. For thousands of years, gold has been a store of wealth. And today, it is a crucial part of the balanced strategy. Even better, Birch Gold can help you convert an existing IRA or 401k into a tax-sheltered retirement account in gold. All you have to do is text MK to the number 989898, and that will give you a free info kit on gold. There's no obligation. It's just useful information from which you can make a decision. With an A-plus rating with the Better Business Bureau and tens of thousands of happy customers, let Birch Gold help you diversify with gold. Now that in mind. Again, text MK to 989898 today. Glenn, great to see you. How are you?
Hi, Megan. Good to see you as always.
See, you're living proof one can be a gay man and not project neat, feminine energy. I don't get that off of you. And that's the problem, Pete Buttigieg, beard and splitting maul or not.
Well, I mean, this is basically like Pete Buttigieg is living in the woods or whatever, is basically Tim Walz's camouflage hat. And I think,
yes,
all of this, there's a lot to say here, but this everything you just went over illustrates the core problem of the Democratic Party. Before Trump, the ideal Democratic politician was somebody who went to Harvard and then Yale Law School and then worked at Goldman Sachs and then moved to McKinsey, like Pete Buttigieg basically did, most sort of amalgam of everything I just said. And they were just these very kind of effete, cosmopolitan people who oozed East Coast values and just grew increasingly separate from the ordinary American. And then you have Trump comes along, who, although he grew up very wealthy and became a billionaire in his very kind of, flamboyant life, he always had this kind of resentment against the elites, partly from growing up in Queens and being looked down on by Manhattan elites, even when he was building the largest buildings, that always made him a man of the people. Like, even in his tabloids in New York, he really resonated with, I remember one time he was always, in the news. And I remember him saying, when I lived in New York at the time, it was like in the late 80s, early 90s, He said, yeah, I go to the construction sites and the guys who recognize me that I'm really happiest about are like construction guys. That's what real fame is. Like he always wanted that kind of a connection. That's what he most valued, maybe because that's what he found easiest. And Democrats are now in this situation. They're trying so hard to replicate it, but all they know how to do is like mimic it like a monkey. You know, like they curse more. Like Chuck Schumer goes on, he's like, bastards, you know, which like they told him to do. Sometimes he like pretends to almost curse, and he's like, God darn it, and he pretends like he's so angry that he just can't control himself.
So true.
And this is why they think Jasmine Crockett is appealing, because they think she is what Trump is. The problem is, among many, the one of the main problems is that it's all vapid when these Democrats get like, what does Pete Buttigieg stand for, right? Trump came in with this whole, very aggressive, assertive, huge personality, didn't abide by any of the comportmental rules that politicians used to be forced to abide by. But he had a very clear political beliefs. Love him or hate him, immigration, trade, U.S. foreign policy, war, the unfairness of how America is treated by other countries. It was a very, tough on crime. These were things that were like the bedrock of his worldview. Tell me what Jasmine Crockett or Pete Buttigieg believe in that's even remotely on the same level of conviction, aside from social issues like culture war.
Themselves.
Yeah,
themselves.
And this is I have so much to say when you talk about Pete Buttigieg and Jasmine Crockett and James Talarico and Democrats.
Yes,
so let me just add one more point, which is this is very much similar to AOC, by the way. Like, and I just want to say one of the things that Marjorie Taylor Greene first said. I've always liked Marjorie Taylor Greene. I always thought Marjorie Taylor Greene, and still do, think she's very smart and insightful. And of course, Democrats look at her and think she's stupid because she has a Southern accent. I've always thought she was very smart. And one of the things Marjorie Taylor Greene used to always say about AOC, because she served in the House with her all those years, she didn't attack AOC the way most people on the right did. Oh, she's a communist, she's a socialist, she's a radical. That's like giving too much credit to AOC. That suggests that AOC has these like bedrock convictions that are immovable. If she's a hardcore ideologue, she's not. She's a careerist. And so Marjorie Taylor Greene would always attack AOC, not by calling her a communist, but by saying she's a fraud, a tool of the establishment, and a conniver and a climber, which is exactly what AOC is. She went from, we're going to do a revolution against the Democratic Party, to the most valuable weapon the Democratic Party has. And I think that's true of like Jasmine Crockett, this perception that she's on the left. It's really not true. She had a lot of AIPAC money. She came crypto industry. Banks love her. Everything is a fraud with these people. It's like an inch deep. Same with Pete Buttigieg. They are the byproduct of this very elite East Coast kind of culture that they know now they have to distance themselves from, but it's in their blood and bones. You don't extract that. No matter what accent you use or what kind of ghetto talk you try pretend you have, or you dress up in like plaid shirts and go out into the woods, it just oozes out of you, and people can smell that authenticity. That's one thing you cannot fool Americans about.
That speaking of the fake accent in Jasmine Crockett, we've got to play this. That her miraculous turnaround. Normally, if you grow up, talking street, most people who would run for federal office might aspire to like get rid of that accent and just speak with a regular accent. And she went the opposite way in order to up her cool factor, and wound up making a fool of herself. Jasmine Crockett before and after. Stat 6.
My mind, I'm thinking, I just got to Austin and I had to meet 5 people to get here. I don't know about this. So y'all don't know what white privilege looks like, but I'm gonna show you a little bit of something. It's a huge responsibility. The congressional seat is over 4 times as large as my House seat.
So trying to get clarification. Calm down. No, because this is what you do.
And I was just starting to get into the rhythm of doing constituent services.
We send them to Texas, they send them to Florida. Every deplorable state that we can think about, they usually coming out of y'all's think tank.
There was someone that talked to me and said, in fact, a former senator and the Clinton administration.
Please
Don't tell me to calm down because y'all talking them ways, and then
You're out of control.
He said, Jasmine, what you have to realize is that if you are really going to make change, it's not going to be in the Texas House. He said, you did a great job playing defense, but you have a chance to play offense. Someone on this committee then starts talking about somebody's bleach blonde, bad built butch body.
So she's a fraud. And it didn't take much for even the Texas Democrats, who are real Democrats, to see right through her, Glenn. And she got that seat running as the girl in the red velvet jacket there, who was just sort of sweet sounding, normal, had gone to law school, had been a public defender, and was trying to represent her hometown community. And then she turned into this sort of wannabe star with the way she spoke and what she said, and some sort of badass street fighter, and they bounced her ass right out of there.
Yeah, that is one thing I actually disagreed with you about in your intro when you said you thought she was headed toward an MS Now show. I actually think she's headed to like some Housewives franchise on Bravo. Like that's always what she's most reminded me of.
Good bet too.
You know, it's the way she just like she is good at attracting attention by turning herself into kind of like a freak show. Cable news loves her, can't get enough of her, eats her up. She's interesting. Like in the you talk about her more than you would just like the average Democrat. You have to give her that. But they're all negative traits, right? Like if I go onto the street and start stabbing my eyes out with a fork, a lot of people are going to look at me more than like the people walking to their office. It doesn't mean it's a positive thing, but it is true. I'll attract more attention. She's figured out that game, and that's the thing, Megan. You know, like Donald Trump proved more than anybody and understood more than anybody. Media attention and fame and just having attention always being on you is an incredible political asset. She had that advantage a zillion times for James Tallarico because she did get catapulted by the CNNs and MSNBCs, now into this national figure, and her name recognition was 40 points higher. But the more they looked at her and the more they heard from Tallarico, they're like, it isn't even just an electability issue where James Tallarico is more electable. It's just that they turned away from her. And her campaign matched that diva behavior that you were describing. They were aggressive with reporters, kicking reporters out negatively about her, barely even campaigning, not doing any of the things that they really had a campaign. It was just a disorganized mess that she thought she was going to win on the strength of her personality. The more Texas personality, Texas Democrat.
Reports, we covered this last year. She's lazy, that she wasn't showing up to Capitol Hill for the hearing. She didn't want to do her job. She wanted to work from home. She wanted to be driven around in fancy cars and, somebody opens the door for her and be treated like, the queen she thinks she is. Like, that doesn't get you anywhere. I'm sorry, but, like, if you're not willing to work hard, especially as a young person, my God, like, that's when we have energy, like, the 32-year-old me had a lot more energy than I have today. I still have decent energy, but my point is simply, if you're out of it when you're still in your 30s, forget about it. Plus, she's just a liar. Like, she wanted us to believe over that she had some, like, hard Scrabble background and she really climbed her way up, just like AOC. And these were lies. Benny Johnson went to her hometown and actually figured out what her real background was in an amazing clip. Here it is again, SOT 7. We played when he first hit with it about 6 months ago. Watch.
It is rough, it is tough, it is hood, and it is foul, just like Jasmine Crockett. That's the whole persona. Wrong. This is where Jasmine says she's from, but this is where Jasmine's really from.
Welcome to St. Louis, specifically the Republican suburbs of St. Louis, with the man's country clubs and private schools. This is where Jasmine Crockett was raised. We're talking quiet suburbs, manicured lawns, college brochures, and the mailbox.
This is where Jasmine Crockett went to school. It's called the Mary Institute and St. Louis Country Day School. It's one of the most prestigious institutions in the entire country, also one of the most expensive. Did your high school have its own private Wimbledon? Did your high school have its own aquatic center on site? Did your high school have its own private dock and pond teeming with colorful fish and wildlife? I think not.
Well done, Benny Johnson. Mine didn't. I went to public school in upstate New York. My parents paid taxes and they had to take me. How about yours, Glenn?
I went to public school as well. We definitely did not have a pond with exotic fish, nor a full-on Wimbledon or anything even remotely similar to that. It's like the way, Megan, that AOC tries to pretend that she's from the Bronx when in reality she's from Westchester. Yes. And I wanted to make this point about Jasmine Crockett. It's like, if somebody grows up in the inner city or in a predominantly black neighborhood where in the South or wherever where people do speak that way, and then they kind of learn when they enter professional context to speak a little bit differently. I think we all do that. Right? We speak differently with our childhood friends or our family and differently in a public context. That would be one thing, but what she's doing is almost like a minstrel show. That's not how she speaks. And as you said, when she ran for office, that wasn't how she spoke. She was a public defender, but she was also a corporate lawyer. This is what I'm saying. Like, she is I think a lot of people look at Black Democrats, especially like Black women, and if they're really boisterous, even more so like a Maxine Waters or whatever, and they say, oh, they must be like super left wing. The reality is often they're not. Mostly they're like funded by AIPAC, they're funded by Wall Street. Maxine Waters was the chair of the Financial Services Committee years, and all the bankers loved her. These are, people who go and make themselves, as Marjorie Hill Green said about AOC, establishment tools, and that's what makes it extra offensive that Jasmine Crockett pretends to be this, because Jesse Jackson would speak like that, but Jesse Jackson grew up like that. That was his politics.
That was authentic. Totally
yeah,
different.
exactly.
And no one ever commented on it when it was obviously authentic. It's only when it's an obvious affect that you make it a thing, that it's fair game.
Yeah, it becomes patronizing. Like, who is this for? I mean, mostly for white liberals, to be honest. I think that's really her big fan base.
That's why Rachel's so enamored.
By the way, Megan, just one thing, I was amazed. I'm always amazed by this. I don't know if you are, but when you said, oh, listen to these MS Now liberals saying how great both Jasmine Crockett and James Talarico are, and the first voice is Nicole Wallace. I still, Nicole Wallace, 20 years ago, was George and Dick Cheney's communications director,
yes,
defending the Iraq War, defending every one of those conservative policies, and she supposedly just got alienated from Republicans because she didn't like Trump, but she had a complete transformation and turned into an overnight liberal for her career, talking about frauds. But in any event, yeah, I mean, the idea that these two are the future of the Democratic Party, and notice it's all surface stuff. Well, it's all surface. It has nothing to do with the agenda.
Let's check another James Talarico shot to see if he's the future of the Democrat Party and is going to fly as a statewide choice in Texas. Here he is in November 2022 at his home church.
Before we go further, I want to acknowledge that our trans community needs abortion care too. Defending trans Texans is something we have to do every day at the state capitol. And you better believe I'll be giving sermons on that too. So when I use the word woman, it should not be understood as an exhaustive, but rather as a lens through which to understand, examine, and interrogate patriarchy. Similar to how we specify anti-Black racism when talking about police violence, sometimes it's helpful to locate a particular within a particular movement.
Okay, clips are going to be on loop until we get to the general election, whether it's Talarico versus Paxton or Talarico versus Cornyn. And frankly, I think it's going to be Paxton. I feel like Texans have had enough of the neocon Cornyn. Like, they're ready for something new. Paxton's got his own baggage, but he seems pretty beloved and he's Trumpian, which is, all the rage, very in for obvious reasons. So we'll see. But can you imagine this guy versus Ken Paxton in a race? He's going to get eaten alive.
Well, just first of all, it is interesting because Christianity can have kind of a left-wing tinge, like in Latin America, for example. It's very associated with left, but not by calling God non-binary and saying the Bible says that trans people needs abortions. It's usually like a left-wing populist economic populism, like Jesus taught us,
or immigration.
Or immigration, exactly. You can make absolutely, and yeah, I mean the Pope has against the death penalty. Always against wars, condemning aggression. So you can definitely construct a very Christian, genuine argument for left-wing or liberal economic populism and policy non-interventionism for sure. But that stuff, I don't know, maybe it was 2021. I don't know if he's from an extremely liberal district. It was right in the wake of the Black Lives Matter and all the obligatory speech where they all started talking that way. It just aged so poorly. And I don't think that, by the way, that most voters vote on trans stuff, but if there's a perception that somebody's so far filled, sounding is he's not just saying hey, let's be kind and, decent and tolerant to our trans neighbors. He's saying the Bible teaches that trans people have to get abortions too. That stuff sounds so extremist that even though that isn't their main issue or close to it, it makes them seem, again, very distant from their everyday lives and what they think about and how they speak.
Yes. Especially when he's saying God is non-binary. All of it is going to make wonderful campaign ads. I know the Democrats today, some of them are heaving a sigh of relief that he prevailed over Crockett, who many did not believe had a chance at statewide office in Texas. And they think this guy is sort of the kinder, gentler, more sellable candidate. Maybe he is versus Crockett, but I'm not entirely sure of that, to be honest, because he's pretty radical in his policies, as we've been playing in the first 26 minutes here. And it's just going to get shoved down his throat no matter who the Republican it is. It's just another example, as far as I'm concerned, of Democrats not understanding the constituency. Before we leave Jasmine Crockett, because we may be leaving her forever, depending on, what happens.
Unless we
with her.
cover, unless we do a
Let's look at
podcast
Benny
together
Johnson.
about Bravo shows, in which case we might have the opportunity to cover her.
Well, when you're on, we do that toward the end. And today we do have more Michelle Obama for you, Glenn Greenwald. But let's not leave Jasmine before showing Benny's comparison of Jasmine Crockett's district in South Dallas with her hometown.
Here's what your average street looks like in South Dallas, where Jasmine Crockett represents.
Best part about Jasmine Crockett's district is free public bathrooms.
Here's what your average street looks like in St. Louis, in the suburbs where Jasmine Crockett's from.
Here's an elementary school in the heart of Jasmine Crockett's district. Let's go ahead and check on the environment in which these kids are learning. You have burned down buildings in action. Nothing's open. FDJT has been tagged on this building. Here's the way to school in Crockett's district. This is what the children have to walk through every single day. I don't know how many booze bottles there are, how many beer cans, and how much junk.
And here's what a school looks like in St. Louis. And here's what stores and shopping centers look like in South Dallas. And here's what stores and shopping centers look in St. Louis. Get the point?
Yeah, he's did such a great job of that whole thing. That she parachuted in. She said, "Oh, I'm one of you." She got elected. She started talking street like she was from Bronx or whatever the equivalent is in Texas. And it was all lies. I think, even though you're right, she attracts attention for doing some of this stuff, there's enough light for people like this, Because to your point as well, it's one thing if it's authentic and you're Trump and you have the Brooklyn accent because it's, you came by it honestly. You were born in Queens. The Queens accent, I guess there is a slight difference. My dad's from Brooklyn, or was. In any event, it's one thing if it's authentic, and it's another if it's an affectation. It really doesn't take much to see the difference.
Yeah, I think basically the two things that are most destructive for a political candidate are, number one, seeming like they're tied to the establishment. I do think that was Kamala Harris's biggest problem. I think I've said before on your show, my impression of her is always that she had just walked out of a board of directors meeting of Aetna, where they were doing actuary tables and she was the general counsel.
I love it.
That is what she just gives me so much. And I think that's what people got from her. She tried a little bit of that code switching in the way she spoke to, and it was even less convincing.
Oh, yeah.
But any kind of reaching of establishment. Exactly. And she used to have an Indian accent when she first ran in California as well. That completely disappeared. But, so that's one thing, and that's Pete Buttigieg's problem. He can wear as many camouflage hats as he wants. He's never going to escape what he really is. And as you said at the beginning, it's very effete. It's not because he's gay or anything else. He's just he wanted to go and just work with numbers in an office and just be a very kind of rule abiding, conformist. This is a very weak behavior. And then the other problem is when people think that you're fake, when people think that you are inauthentic, when you're trying to calm them or snow them. And good politicians can calm people. Bill Clinton was very good at that. Obama was good at that. Trump has that too. But at the core, you need to be authentic because, as I said before, especially more so now where there's so much exposure. They don't just go on Sunday shows or a presidential debate twice a year. There's constant exposure. If you're fake, people are going to sniff it out.
Well, it's funny how all these Democrats, in trying to figure out how to make themselves have mass appeal, are growing facial hair, from Ezra Klein to Chris Murphy of Connecticut to now Pete Buttigieg. I'm going to start looking like Paul Bunyan, and that will make me sellable to the large electorate. So The Atlantic bought it, hook, line, and sinker, and sitting with Buttigieg, and the title of the piece, as I mentioned, is Pete Buttigieg in the Wilderness. I quoted the line, "He has a beard, a splitting mall, and a house in Michigan. Is that enough to convince America that he's a man of the people?" This is the big setup piece for his presidential campaign. This is how he's kicking it off. Make no mistake about it. 2028 is right around the corner. We're already at 26. It's on. And this is Pete Buttigieg getting it off, Atlantic, getting it off to a start. Lead line of the article. In May 2001, Harvard Institute of Politics. A 19-year-old freshman named Peter Buttigieg asked David Gergen, a Harvard professor and horse whisperer to 5 Presidents, a question that he might have reserved for himself a couple of decades later. Peter, who had not yet transformed into Pete, let alone Mayor Pete, said he loved the West Wing, but could feel the idealism reflected in the show slipping away from politics in real life. Quote, "The presidency has now devolved into what's called the MBA White House, or the corporate model," he said, with the plaintive tone of a child asking about the spirit of Christmas. Quote, "Is that magic really gone forever?" Worse than being underused, they go on to talk him, is being used in a campaign destined for failure. And they talk about Kamala Harris and how she considered Pete Buttigieg, but then overruled him, and talked about how he felt about this. They say, okay, we were already asking a lot of America, she wrote in her memoir, and a lack of grace. Buttigieg has never thanked her for that slight. Being passed over has left him the most prominent Biden stalwart to remain viable as a candidate for the nomination in 2028. Okay, so they're setting it all up. Like, see how she left him the most prominent Biden stalwart, so he's still got the establishment down. He's viable as a candidate for the Democratic nomination. And here he was wistfully talking about the West Wing. Oh, and he went to Harvard. Did we mention he was at Harvard's Institute of Politics? And idealistic, and he has a beard and a splitting wall. So you see it all. It's not even subtle, Glenn.
No, this is exactly what I mean, Megan. So I don't know what you were like at 19. I think I have some ideas. I know what I was like at 19. I was
Picture
not
very, very bad blonde bleached hair. Speaking of bleached blonde hair, out of a box, because I was poor, and that's how you had to do it.
right. And like, I don't know. I wasn't at Harvard, like hugging on the coattails of David Gergen, like trying to form some. I don't know. For people who don't know, David Gergen is like the ultimate Washington insider. Was like the whisperer to multiple presidents in both parties, like the supreme Washington establishment centrist or moderator, or whatever. And then he was on CNN, like one of the wise men of Washington. And that is who Pete Buttigieg is. It was who he was since he was very young. Like, this is the core of somebody that cannot change. You can change how they dress. You can change whether they have facial hair. You can change what kind of hat they wear. But like, who you are is who you are. And you can evolve and grow and all that, but you cannot escape that core personality that is still Pete Buttigieg. And that is who he is. Harvard and David Gergen and Z. And also, like, this electoral success, you know how many votes he got when he won to be mayor of South Bend? The maximum, like, in both times was like 8,000 people, 8,000 votes.
Oh, wow.
And
wow.
The whole thing is built on a fake artifice, like a total house of cards.
Well, so the Atlantic loves it. I mean, like I said, hook, line, and sinker. He sounds like the young member of the old Democratic Party, the one that flourished before Trump, brainy, credentialed, and elite, liberal but not progressive, and personable, but this might be key, frightfully boring. Buttigieg is technocracy made flesh. Who could be safer than a politician who has had his heart punched at all the great meritocratic institutions and who has followed the modern cursus honorum, some sort of Latin honorum, from local office to national? And who could be less Trumpian? He's unashamed of technical competence, even when it makes him sound dweebish. Without embarrassment, he bragged to me during his days as a management consultant, worked with data sets, quote, too big for Excel to handle, ha ha ha. And then they go on to say the following. Hold on, buckle up. Buttigieg's critics seem to fault him for the vaguest reasons, many of which come down to, he's too perfect, Glenn. I'm quoting for the piece. He's too perfect. That's the problem with Pete Buttigieg. Now he gets to it. He's not authentic. He's not a man of the people. It's an odd line of attack. Is it possible you're perfect? Is perfection a flaw? This is unbelievable. I'm sure J.D. Vance is getting exactly this treatment in The Atlantic. Social psychology has documented something known as the pratfall effect, the trust of people deemed too perfect. It turns out that people like smart, charismatic types, but they really like smart, charismatic types who screw up now and then and do not just ace every test and land every joke. It's the interview question. What are some of your flaws?
Exactly.
I work too hard. I'm a perfectionist. And this writer, hook, line, and sinker, as I said, Graham Wood, who teaches at Yale and is a member of Council on Foreign Relations, was like, I'm in love.
No, but you know what's so funny, Megan, is when I was just describing why Pete Buttigieg is such a pathetically weak candidate, why he'll never have this like compelling appeal, actually sounded almost identical to the Atlantic article, at least until I got to the part about how he's too perfect. That he is like from a different political era, like from the Obama era, where people wanted technocrats and like very kind of cold, people who came out of establishment institutions. The authority and credibility of all those institutions are in collapse. And the more you have to do with them, the more you smell like them, the more you seem like you're a byproduct of them, the weaker you are. So yeah, maybe he would have been a good candidate in like the Democratic Party of Barack Obama in 2012 or 2008. Trump destroyed all of that political era, that whole political appeal. And you see like smarter politicians like Gavin Newsom who realize that and are also trying to show that they're just kind of like regular guys who speak in regular speak. Pete Buttigieg doesn't have it in him, and the Atlantic is like ground zero for the political establishment. And so of course they still think are appealing traits when in reality they're fatal.
Yeah, so, and by the way, Newsom is another person lying about his origin story. And one other excerpt from this piece. He never spoke more slowly or sounded worse than when I asked him about the issue he will be most harshly critiqued on if he runs, his silence during Biden's cognitive decline. Quote, "We all saw what we saw, that he was old," he said. "I never saw him that was different or worse because he was old." End quote. And as long as the decision-making was sound, Buttigieg had no duty to pull a senility alarm. Well, this will be a problem for Pete Buttigieg, among other Democrats running. Why didn't they say anything about Biden's cognitive decline? He was part of the administration, said nothing. Gavin Newsom wasn't part of the administration, but he's also going to get questioned about it because he was such a huge Gavin Newsom backer, but Joe Biden backer. The Emerson poll that was most recent on Democratic presidential possibilities hit February 26th, says the following. Newsom leads the pack at 20%. Buttigieg is second at 16%. Harris is third at 13%. AOC is fourth at 9%. Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro has 7%. Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear at 5%. 24% are undecided. So it right now, if you were to go by today, it's Newsom versus Buttigieg for this and they are very different. I mean, I'm not going to lie. Every woman I talk to, when you sit, I'm constantly like, damn it, and every woman, even the Republican ones are like, he is hot. It doesn't hurt in politics to be very good looking. Pete Buttigieg is not. You don't look at him and think hot, but he's trying to get like cooler with the beard and the plaid, right? The equivalent of the camo hat. We'll see whether that works on anybody. I mean, no woman is fantasizing like at Pete Buttigieg because we know he's gay. So like, I guess you can't.
But
really
that's not the only reason.
Exactly,
that's not the only reason. Even if he were totally straight, you still wouldn't be.
No, my God, who would want that on top of them? I mean, gay or straight or whatever, male or female. It's a no. Okay. But speaking of Gavin Newsom, he sat down with Mark Halperin, and he is now in that clip where he's talking to the mixed audience, but a lot of black people in it, saying, "I'm like you. I can't read. I got a 960 on the SAT." I mean, it's just absolutely devastating. But what he's saying is, "I'm like you, dumb. That's how I relate to you, black people. I'm dumb. Can't read." Ridiculous, but okay. So he sat down with Mark Halperin, who asked him, are you actually dyslexic? Can you read? And here's how that went. SOT 12.
Can you read? Can you read a book? I can read. I just have to underline it. I can't read spatially. I can't. That's why I can't read a speech mark, because spatially I'll lose the line. So I'll literally, and I wish I had a book here. If you ever lend me a book, that's why I don't go to the library, because I can never return the book. I have to underline, and then I'll do is I'll take what's underlined and then I'll put it out. And this is literally an actual example. I'll just put in pieces of paper everything underlined. And then I'll do that for hours and hours and hours. And then eventually I'll put it on a little yellow card. We'll have just quick notes, and then it's in my head. But that's the process. That's why everything online I have to print out. So I take what's online, print out your blog or something, and then underline it, and then put it in here. So it's a process.
So you can't
but
read on a phone. You can't read on a phone or an iPad.
I can. I start daydreaming. I start drifting off, and so pen is the key.
Yeah.
I might also be dyslexic. Look at me. I have to underline all my too. Like, I don't know. I actually don't doubt him that he's got some sort of a learning disability, because Yashar Ali, who worked in his office, has said online this has long been known about him. It's fine, okay, but what you actually did to the audience was, I'm like you, I can't read. I got a 9.6 on the SAT. So this dyslexic or not, he's not saved by this. This is all a crutch to get out of what was an offensive comment in the way it was delivered to this particular audience, in my view. Your thoughts?
Well, also, he's been in public for 20 years. And why now? Why was this suddenly thrust forward as something we have to hear about Newsom from Gavin Newsom? It just seems very exploitative. And then when you listen to him describe what the issue is to Mark Halperin, I kind of believe it too, mostly because who cares? Like, yeah, I'm sure it's just something, I don't know, like his attention wanders. Does your attention wander sometimes if you're reading a book? Does.
Yeah, right.
You know, I think it's very much like, oh, you know what'll make me seem relatable is if I talk about my disability. And, you know, he's posted pictures of himself.
No, and he's digging himself out of the hole that he created.
Right, but why did he create that hole?
In front of that largely black audience.
Right, but create that hole because he was trying to be relatable. Like, yes, I know when I was, 18 or 20, best friends with this billionaire family that financed my businesses and financed my political career. But don't worry, I'm like you because I can't read and got poor scores on my SAT. I mean, the way it was said was very offensive, but also the impulse was, again, it's like monkey behavior. They think they're imitating Trump, although Trump would never talk about his disabilities, but it's like a way of trying to be open and vulnerable, kind of like, I don't know, the Oprah era or something. It just seems very off to me. You know, he's been in public life for more than 2 decades, and now suddenly we have to hear about his dyslexia. I'm like, who cares,
I know,
Megan?
and it's part of the thing that you're right, that has him out there like, a single mom, mac and cheese. His dad was a judge, and he was getting boatloads of dough from the Getty family. Was featured in a magazine article with the Getty kids, in front and center with the caption, "Children of the Rich." Like, okay, again, back to the Benny Johnson thing. Did you get featured in a magazine, Glenn, growing up as child of the rich? Me neither.
Megan, did you have best friends who were billionaires, the Gettys? Were you best friends with the Morgans?
We didn't even know any doctors or lawyers.
Yeah,
we had nothing. We never met a judge. Like that was a huge thing. Like, to find that out. I mean, when I went to law school at Albany Law School, a fine pedestrian law school. It was great if you want to go to practice law in New York. But beyond that, it's not well known. I thought I'd made it, Glenn. I was like, now people are going to have to take me seriously because I'm going to be a lawyer. I was so impressed with the possibility of getting a law degree. We didn't know anybody who had an advanced degree like that. Like, do I run around reminding my audience of my humble beginning every day? No, I don't. This is like a uniquely weird politician thing. He'd be better off just pulling a Trump. Yeah, I was so lucky. The Gettys took such good care of me, and I was born to a really smart dad who was a judge and a mom who was loving and worked hard. Just own your actual history. That's what authentic looks and sounds like.
Yeah. I remember when they would bring up Trump's bankruptcies, and he'd be like, yeah, bankruptcy is a great tool in the law. Maybe it shouldn't be there. Maybe it should be, but it is there. And I'm a businessman. I'm going to use all the tools. And Psaki, when he was asked about things like his father's wealth and the opportunities, he didn't say, no, I grew up very, exactly what you said. It does give the impression that Trump always is willing to tell the truth. He doesn't have shield. Now, Trump lies a lot, like every president, every political leader. I don't mean that. I mean that when he talks about himself and just kind of being conversant, he almost lacks that filter that politicians have where you calculate what you're going to say, calibrate it for the best effect on the audience. Many, many times that Trump speaks, he just simply lacks it. Or he doesn't care enough, and
it was like the moment with Hillary Clinton, right? At the one debate, you didn't pay your taxes. You paid 0 taxes. And he was like, that makes me smart.
Exactly.
There was no denial.
Exactly.
He was like, yeah. Here's another fact for you. Pete Buttigieg lives in Traverse City, which has become the Hamptons of Michigan. I mean, it is a joke that he lives in the wilderness of Michigan, according to our Michigan sources. So that too is not true. And as for Gavin Newsom, Gordon and Ann Getty paid about $233,000 toward his first wedding reception. His 30th birthday party given by the Gettys was Great Gatsby themed, down to the Flappers and Charlestons. And per the San Francisco Chronicle in 2003, in 10 of Gavin Newsom's first 11 business, the primary money came from, you guessed it, the Getty family. Once again, Glenn, did you have some billionaire family like the Astors or the Rockefellers or the Vanderbilts or the Gettys pay for anything in your life? No, no one did, other than this guy trying to convince us he's a man of the people.
You know, when you that is amazing. Like, he was basically like an honorary Getty. They really took a gigantic interest in like every aspect of his funding his wedding and throwing birthday parties for him, investing in 10 of his business. I mean, that connection, yes. He didn't just know the Gettys. It was an extremely deep and intricate relationship. Who knows why? Maybe they saw that he was a star.
Who takes $233,000 from someone who's not their family for the wedding?
30 years ago.
What?
So that was like, $7 or almost $1 million
yes.
now, or 800,000 or whatever.
That's exactly right. And that was to our pal Kimberly Guilfoyle. Quick break. We're right back with Glenn. Don't go away. Feeling sluggish, bloated, not quite like yourself? Life constantly bombards with silent threats, processed foods, artificial light, nonstop stress, all of which disrupt gut health, drain energy, and weaken immune health. When that happens, it's not that your body is broken, it's that it might be missing the right inputs. That's why I want to tell you about Armra Colostrum. It's packed with more than 400 bioactive nutrients that they say can work at a foundational level to fortify gut health, support immune health, fuel recovery, and promote whole body vitality. Strong gut integrity can support metabolism, skin and hair health, and even performance and recovery, which is why colostrum has long been valued by some elite athletes as well. If you are looking to take back control of your health from the inside out, consider Armra. And they have a special deal for you. Go to armra.com, Megan, ARMRA.com/Megan, or enter Megan to get 30% off your first subscription order. That's ARMRA.com/Megan. All right, before we move on to Iran, and there's plenty to discuss, there was a presser out of the Pentagon this morning. I've got to run this Michelle Obama soundbite by you, Glenn. It's Michelle Obama Day for you. Sat down with Conan O'Brien, and you're going to be shocked to learn she feels that there's a double standard when it comes to first families, depending on skin color. Watch.
I could tell when you and I took a trip once to visit a big, giant military base in the Middle East. You and your team were being so careful that everything is done by the book. You know, there's no perks, I was really impressed with that. And it occurred to me then, oh, I see. Everyone feels we need to be so far beyond.
It wasn't even a feeling, it was the truth.
It's the truth.
I mean, there's absolutely no way that the behavior in this current administration would have been accepted by the first Black family in the White House.
Right.
You don't get here without being damn near perfect.
Yeah.
We don't get to fail.
Right.
2, 3, 5, 7 times. We don't get to file bankruptcy over and over again and still be considered a successful business person.
Right.
Right. We don't get to not be at the top of the class. Every I has to be dotted, every T has to be crossed.
Okay. She behaved on her best at a military base. She's Black. And she couldn't fall below the standard. That's why she behaves so well. While visiting troops serving in the military on their territory. It's because she's Black. That's why she had to act so well, Glenn.
I mean, that was a hard clip to get through, Megan. Just tell you, for you, I will do it. But that was not easy because it wasn't just her. Like, the whole thing was set up by Conan being the good, white, progressive ally.
Yes.
Basically saying it was his thesis. He was like, first of all, it was very funny because he was basically saying what the Atlantic said about Buttigieg, like, you were you were like perfect to a fault. You know, everything about it is so perfect. And he's like, and then I realized, like, that's because you're black. She's like, absolutely. And this, you know, this grievance is from her. I don't understand why. Is there nobody near her who says, you know, Michelle, you're one of the richest and most famous women in the world. You spend your time traveling around like Richard Branson's yacht and, you know, with Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos in the most luxurious places. You have a gigantic estate in Martha's Vineyard in a bigger mansion or a big, huge mansion, multi-million-dollar mansion in Washington. You were the first lady. Your husband was the president of the United States. Every door is open for you. Maybe like just tune down a little bit on constant grievance because you're not really like a major figure of sympathy. But she can't. The Americans twice voted for him. You know, they were in the White House for 8 years. Before that, he was elected senator out of nowhere by the state of Illinois. And you would think that, you know, she spent the first half of her life like under Jim Crow or in chains or something. The way she speaks, and it's really resentment producing.
She's like, oh, you know, we have to get perfect grades in order to be acceptable. The truth is exactly the opposite, and we all know that. Affirmative action is there to help Black Americans like Michelle Obama, who didn't get perfect grades, wind up at Princeton. That's what happened in her case, and she knows it. She did not have to get perfect. In fact, this system bent over backward to help her get into our most elite institutions, despite the fact that she failed to do that. Trump and his bankruptcies happened because he spent his life for decades as a businessman, taking massive risks in real estate, one of the most volatile industries we have. And he played the system just like all people in that business do. Something she would know nothing about because she'd done nothing prior to becoming First Lady. She spent a few years at a white shoe law firm in Chicago. Sorry, look, I've done that. I've done that literally the exact same thing. It's fine. It's a respectable way to spend your living, your life, but you're not a woman of the world coming at it. You haven't taken big risks like President Trump did when he was a private citizen, so she would know nothing about filing for bankruptcy as a corporate tool to take care of debt and so on. She has no idea what she's talking about. Everything for her reduces racial grievance.
Yeah, I mean, it's so tiresome. I heard Obama himself talking the other day about his library, and he was talking about how there's going to be a whole wing of the library for what people really want to see, which were Michelle's dresses. She spent 8 years. It wasn't like she innovated the position of First Lady and took on, you know, she did some stuff on like children eating well, which is fine. It's a good cause, like not to be obese and to exercise. But it wasn't like she was some driving force or intellectual pioneer in that position. She really is known for her love of fashion. You know, and her relationship with the world of fashion. That's really what she most became known for. And also, the Obama presidency was far, far, far from perfect. They bailed out the banks. They let huge millions and millions of people go underwater, get evicted from their home because of their inability to pay mortgage. They had a gigantic fund. All those drone attacks and wars overseas, they destroyed Libya, and he got reelected. So where's this framework that if you're black, you have to be perfect in order to succeed when her own husband is a living, breathing testament of the falsity of that?
The other piece of it is, Glenn, like, you would think as a lady, all these years later, if somebody says to you, you know, I remember I was at a military base, and so both of these two, what Conan O'Brien, I was waiting for him to say was, maybe you were so great with the troops. The way you guys interacted seemed so authentic to me, like how much you loved them. Or could you believe how badass the guys were? You know, they were huge and they were badass MFers. Or for her, even not having it teed up that way, to go there. Like, that's the normal instinct by most patriots, to make it about the guys and the gals who you saw at the military base. But both of them were determined to make it about her. And not just her, but about racial grievance, again, with some slips and digs at Trump. It's just, she's so small-minded. This is the only lens through which she sees her experience as First Lady. There's no gratitude, not even troops, not a word about how tough they were, or amazing they were, or how selfless they were in their sacrifice. Just her sacrifice in having to be First Lady for 8 years and deal with the abject racism of the country. I've had it with this bitch. I'm sorry, but like, I'm done listening to her fucking whine, help of, as you point out, little white liberals who are begging for her to pat them on the head.
I don't know about you, Megan, but I kind of do actually, and I can say for myself, like, whatever I have in this world, I'm constantly grateful for it. Like, I'm aware of how blessed I am. Like, I know that I have things that other people don't. And the idea that I would go around, like, not just complaining to myself or in my private realm, but, like, demanding that the public listen to me as I complain about the unfairness of my life. You know, it's like, if you're poor, if you are downtrodden, you've had a lot of tragedy in your life, I get it. Like, I understand why people like that are angry. You can't have a more blessed life than the one that she's had. And yet she as you say, she's there's no gratitude, there's no, yet she can't even pretend to, like, remember that visit to the base being about her being impressed with overseas troops and the sacrifices they make and the courage they make, which is like politics 101. No, it's about how unfair it was that she had to be so regimented because she was black. That is, I mean, malignant narcissism doesn't even capture that at all. It's something way beyond.
Truly, I visited military bases. You go, you do walk away thinking, OMG, I don't know how they do it. I mean, that's been my number one impression. Just, oh my, they're so strong, they're so dedicated. The stories they tell you, if you're inquisitive, Michelle, if you actually bother to speak with the troops about their experiences, you might learn about what they've had to deal with, about, like, just, I remember one guy talking to me about pterodactyl-sized mosquitoes that they had to deal with when they're out on their morning 5K in some of the deployments, like, just things you wouldn't think of. You know, you think of the enemy, you think of gunfire, you don't think of things like that, like pterodactyl-sized mosquitoes. In any event, she's always about herself. She reduces everything to race. I'm sick of her shtick. That was her podcast today. I mean, this is like, to this day, it's 2026, and she's still bitching about her time as lady. Get over it, for the love of God. Okay, let's keep going. You mentioned Barack Obama droning people, and that brings us to warfare and Iran. We had a briefing from Pentagon Chief Pete Hegseth, Secretary of War, along with the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Dan Raisin Kane, this morning, and here was a bit of how that sounded. SOT 13.
Thus far, Operation Epic Fury has delivered twice the air power of Iraq in 2003, minus Paul Bremer and the nation building. We are just getting started. We are accelerating, not decelerating. The Iranian Air Force is no more, built in 1996, destroyed in 2026. The Iranian Navy rests at the bottom of the Persian Gulf. Combat ineffective, decimated, destroyed. The combination of U.S. and Israeli intelligence and combat power will control Iran. We've taken control of Iran's airspace and waterways without boots on the ground. We control their fate.
Though the president says we are likely to be there for another 4 to 5 weeks, and this is what Netanyahu said on Hannity the other night. SOT 26.
I said it could be quick and decisive. It may take some time, but it's not going to take years. It's not an endless war. In fact, it's an effort right now to achieve the peace that we all yearn and pray for.
It may take some time, is as far as he went. The president, 4 to 5 weeks, we really don't know. It's not going to be quick, and it doesn't seem like they're leaning toward taking the out that a lot of MAGA has been begging them to take. Just say it's a success right now. You took out the Ayatollah. You took out 39 of the other top members of the regime. You've put the Navy at the bottom of the ocean. You've gotten control of the airspace. You've done a lot of damage to their top missile sites and so on. Can we just declare it a win right now and leave and do it should have been done in Iraq after the shock and awe? He made a reference to the shock and awe. Just do that. It's a win right now and leave, but we're not prepared to do that. It's going to get worse, and we're still told that the full unleashing is yet to come. So your thoughts on where we are now? Five. Yeah.
Okay, first of all, this is exactly what we heard, not just before the Iraq War, but into the Iraq War. It's only a matter of weeks, maybe a couple months at the most. This is not going to be a prolonged war. We have total dominance over the Iraqi military. They're dispersed, they're destroyed, their military is destroyed. As you know, of course, President Bush George W. Bush made that notorious trip with the gigantic Mission Bush banner behind him, which, I mean, I understand from the military perspective, they did what they were at first told to do. But as we know, that accomplished nothing. We did end up being sucked in to Iraq. On top of that, even Tony Blair, one of the primary decision makers that advocated it, admits in retrospect that the power vacuum that we created is what gave rise to ISIS, that extremism and all kinds of terrorism can emerge when you take out a government and crush the civil society. So that's one thing. We heard this whole thing before. Yes, they can just say, okay, we're done. But then the question is, what did that accomplish? Remember, the whole thing was justified at first on the grounds that the Iranian government is, slaughtering all of its citizens, killed however many protesters, the number constantly changes, but they killed all. And we were so concerned about that. We wanted to change the government, liberate the Iranian people. If we're going to do that, it's obviously going to take months and years of nation building, which is what Pete Hegseth is scorning. But if we don't do that, what if we're going to smash this country, leave it in a kind of Syria or Libya-like state where we bombed all their police stations, there's no more police, there's going to be anarchy, there's going to be balkanization, there's going to be a power vacuum, who knows who will fill it? For what? For that make the United States safer? It doesn't, just like the Iraq War didn't.
President Trump doesn't seem to have a clear plan in mind when it comes to the Ayatollah succession plan, like who's likely to be elevated. He said to the media the other day, we had a couple of people, but now they're all dead. It looks like they may have elected Khomeini's son to be the next supreme leader. Not totally clear to me whether that's a done deal or whether it's just heading in that direction right now. But by some accounts, he's even more hard than the old man was. And there's a question now about, are we already headed to a place where the new boss is worse than the old boss? And was this thought through?
First of all, this seemed very similar in a way, and I think a lot of people in MAGA are hoping it ends up similar to what happened in Venezuela, which is where we heard for weeks and months about Maduro and all the evils of the Maduro. It was a communist regime that destroyed liberty and destroyed the country. And that's the original impetus for the war in a lot of people's minds. And then Trump goes in, takes out Maduro, doesn't do much else, blew up some boats, and left the entire rest of the government in place, which I'm glad about. I'm glad we didn't destroy the Venezuelan government and the nation built in Venezuela. But the question then is, what did that achieve? We were able to run Venezuela, which we're basically doing. But so what is it in Iran? Are we going to just go in and say, okay, the Ayatollah, we killed some senior leadership, and now the country, we're just going to leave it as is, govern the way it was before? He was asked specifically about the Shah of Iran, which is what all these Iranian exiles want, is the Shah of Iran's son to go be reinstalled. And when they asked Trump about it, he sounded exactly like when he sounded when they asked if Maria Machado was going to go and rule Venezuela. He was like, yeah, nice guy, but I prefer somebody who's actually in the country, who's popular in the country. I don't think Trump wants a radical change in the governance. The problem, Megan, is that once you start a war like this, you control what the other side does. If they do things that require escalation, require retaliation, other countries get involved, that's a very volatile region. And that's what scares me the most. It's not that Trump wants endless war. He doesn't want to be there for years. But sometimes when you start this, you have no choice. Bush didn't intend to be in Iraq for years either, or in Afghanistan for 20 years, and yet were.
The reporting today is from Reuters that, because there's a report that we're running on our interceptors for these missiles at our outposts and domestically. We've given so many to Ukraine. We've already given a bunch to Israel in the wars that they've been involved in. And we've been using them in our combat the Houthis. We use them when we bomb Nigeria over Christmas. So there's a question about whether we have enough interceptors, which are very, very expensive. We're told reportedly 12 million. I've heard as low as 4 million, but the official said 12 million. And you're using them to take out a $30,000 drone. So it's a very, the ratio is not great for us because they've got a lot of drones, the Iranians do, and they have missiles, and we need these interceptors for both. So now there's a report today from Reuters, per 5 people familiar with the plan, that the Trump administration plans to meet with executives from the U.S. defense contractors at the White House on Friday to discuss accelerating weapons production as the Pentagon works to replenish supplies. Got Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, all the usual suspects to talk about things like Tomahawk missiles that Raytheon makes in a new agreement with the Pentagon. At the same time that Reuters again reports the White House meeting is coming as Deputy Defense Secretary Stephen Feinberg has been leading Pentagon work in recent days on a supplemental budget request of around $50 billion that could be released as soon as Friday. The new money would pay for replacing the weapons used in recent conflicts, including those in the Middle East. $50 billion is a huge number, Glenn. It's especially huge in advance of midterms when people are having difficulty paying their rent and their mortgage, and their number one complaint, according to the polls, is the economy.
I mean, this is everything Trump ran on doing. I mean, that is the reality. You can say he changed his mind. You can say whatever. Conditions change. This is exactly what Trump told people he would not do, was pursue foreign wars that didn't have a direct threat to the United States and use our resources for Raytheon and Boeing and General Dynamics instead of viewing their communities with infrastructure and with healthcare and with the kinds of things that Americans should have just to live a decent middle-class life. It's a total violation of what he told Americans. I'm so glad you brought up, if I can just quickly, about this issue about depleting our stockpiles, especially our anti-missile defenses, are crucial to how we've been defending Israel. Dan Caldwell is, I think, one of the smartest people on this question. I interviewed him a lot. I've talked to him a lot. He used to be a very high-ranking official he's fantastic in the Pentagon. Got booted out in sort of a power play, but he knows as much more about this than anything. And he talks about how during the 12-day war, the U.S. and Israel had to end that war because, as Trump said, Israel was getting pummeled hard by ballistic missiles, and they were running out. What Iran has done in this instant is they're not just sending them to Israel, they're sending them to all of the Persian Gulf states on which the United States relies, Saudi Arabia, but especially the Emirates and Bahrain and Jordan. All these states are getting hit, and they don't have very many anti-missile defenses at all. And this idea that we're going to just ramp up production, these are extremely complex systems. They track missiles, they take missiles out of the sky. There's no such thing as ramping up production in a way that's going to be ready in a few weeks or even a couple months. These are years-long processes. That's why we ran out last year. We were using them in Yemen. We gave them to Israel. We gave them training. We used it to defend Israel. And we still don't have very many because of how long it takes and how intricate the process is to rebuild and replenish the stockpile. That is a major issue.
Yeah, and reportedly it's one of the reasons why we waited to even launch this thing, because we were considering doing it a few weeks ago when all those protesters were on the streets of Iran, but we didn't because we realized we needed to reposition our military assets and we needed to shore up some of these interceptors for the expected missile attacks both at the U.S. bases and with our friends. And now it sounds like we're spread thin, although the good news, if you're looking for good news here, appears to be that, at least for now, the number of missiles being launched out of Iran has gone down. Here's General Jack Keane on Fox News yesterday. Tuesday, SOT 31.
Where we are, it exceeds a lot of expectations here. Yesterday, after 2 days, we have reduced attacks by 50%. Today, after 3 days, we've reduced the attacks by 75%. Not only that, this is from ballistic missile. And not only that, but the Iranians had their own intelligence and communication with each other. And obviously, we have a capability to understand what they're communicating, what orders they're putting out. Their own expectation was salvos, Martha, 25, 50 salvos. And the reason for that is if you shoot all those missiles at the same time, you're going to overwhelm the Israeli defense systems and overwhelm the U.S. systems at our bases. Well, they haven't been able to do that.
So what do you make of it?
Well, I'm not privy to the intelligence I would need to be to say for certain if that's true or not. I would put the very strong note of caution that the government and the military in every war, not just our own, but every country's lie to the population, always tell them that we're winning, whether we are or not. This is a very common thing. But let's just assume that that's true, because there is this theory that using their primitive missiles on purpose, they're primitive just to exhaust the anti-missile capabilities, and that their really hypersonic and more advanced ones are ones that they're going to use once those defenses are eroded. But let's assume they're running out of missiles, we're bombing their missile facilities. Making the whole of what happened in the Iraq war between Ukraine the Ukraine war between Ukraine and Russia is that this has been a war that wasn't determined by these big, gigantic, technologically sophisticated missile systems, but by very cheap drones. That's what's doing all of the damage on the battle. And a lot of the supply that Russia has been using has been coming from Iran. That's the thing, is you don't need ballistic missiles to do huge damage. As you were just describing, you need like $20,000, $30,000 drones that you can shoot huge amounts of, even if you don't have a lot of missiles left, and do a ton of damage, especially if you're eroding the anti-missile capability, not just of the U.S. and Israel, but again, the Persian Gulf countries that are going to start demanding that the U.S. stop because their populations are being exposed to attack. And I think there's a lot of implications here that aren't being, it's day 5. The other thing I'll quickly add, Pete Hegseth said, we totally dominate them. We have control of their air, their navy, the waters, the navy. We determine their fate. If we can totally dominate Iran in 5 days, after 5 days of war, how is it possible at the same time to say that this is some brave power that was threatening the United States when apparently, according to Pete Hegseth, it just all completely crumbled? They have like 30-year-old systems, he said. And it's hard to reconcile those claims with the claim that Iran is some sophisticated great power that can do great damage to Americans at home.
Mm-hmm. Well, the president was out there yesterday trying to do some cleanup in aisle 7 after Marco Rubio appears to have told the truth to the Gang of 8 and then was kind of forced to say it to reporters because he'd already said it to the Gang of 8, which is the reason why we launched this attack when we did. That's the most charitable interpretation that the statement was just about timing. But Marco Rubio very clearly told reporters that we did it because we knew that there was going to be Israeli action and that there would be a retaliatory strike by Iran against us. And we preferred to hit them first. But that Bibi was in there saying, we're doing it, Israel, and that we better join with them because we're going to take incoming from Iran in response to that. And we don't want to be hit after. Like, we don't want to be hit before we've hit. Here was that comment from Rubio on Monday, South 16.
It was abundantly clear that if Iran was under attack by anyone, the United States or Israel or anyone, they were going to respond against the United States. We knew that there was going to be an Israeli action. We knew that that would precipitate an attack against American forces. And we knew that if we didn't preemptively go after them, launch those attacks, we would suffer higher casualties. There absolutely was an imminent threat. The imminent threat was that we knew that if Iran was attacked, and we believed they would be attacked, that they would immediately come after us.
Okay, then there was by a reporter on site saying, like, basically, wait, did you just say that we did this because of Israel? What? South 17.
The U.S. was forced to strike because of an impending Israeli action? No, first of all, two things I would say. Number one is, no matter what, ultimately, this operation needed to happen. That's the question of why now. But this operation needed to happen because Iran, in about a year or a year and a half, would cross the line of immunity, meaning they would have so many short-range missiles, so many drones, that no one could do anything about it. Obviously, we were aware of Israeli intentions and understood what that would mean, and we had to be prepared to act as a result of it. But this had to happen no matter what.
Okay. So that's him saying, ultimately, at some point, we were going to have to hit them. But we had to do it now because of Israel, which is like sort of it's the same thing as what he said in the first soundbite, which is we had to do this because of Israel. And the reporter basically said, did you say we had to do it because of Israel? And he said, no, eventually it was going to have to happen, but we did it because of Israel. And then yesterday, Rubio went out and spoke to reporters and took umbrage at the fact that they were saying, hey, you said yesterday we had to do it now because of Israel. And he said, oh, no, I didn't. Go back. Look. Well, we did. We went back. I looked at the entire transcript, and I love Rubio. I'd vote for him in a heartbeat for president. But he was not taken out of context. He did say that. He's over and over and over. If you watch the whole presser, you read the whole transcript, he said it repeat the thing about Israel. And you tell me what's really going on here, Glenn. Because for me, I got to be honest, I'm confused. Because the obvious response, if Israel was in there, be saying, we're going to go now. The Ayatollah's having a meeting. We got to take him out. We're doing it with or without you. He did not want that. Would have been to say, no, we're the senior partner. Everybody knows that. Trump could have stopped Bibi if we were worried about retaliatory strikes or we're not ready yet. And we didn't do that. We clearly want to do that. So is this Israeli inspired? Is it for Israel or isn't it?
Well, one thing that I know for sure, and Netanyahu has said it many times in the past several weeks, is that this has been his number one wish for 40 years, is to lure the United States in change war, or a very serious war with Israel's main adversary in the Middle East, which is Iran. You can literally go back 40 years to Netanyahu advocating this, and now he says, this has long been my number one wish list. This has been the wish list of Israel loyalists and neocons in the United States. He planned to do it after Iraq, but got tied down in Iraq. You can go find 2004 articles where they're like, now we're Tehran. But the problem that Rubio has, and by the way, other people said exactly what Rubio said, including Tom Cotton and others, because if you think about it,
and Johnson
and Mike Johnson, exactly. So the problem is,
and members of the Gang of 8 have come out and said that they were told, but when they got briefed over the weekend as well. I mean, in every comment they said we had to because Israel was going to do this, and we had no choice but to go along.
Exactly. And the reason for it is because the reason why, Mark Rubio is a very competent speaker, very quick on his feet. The reason it was so difficult is because you have to say that this was a preventative war. Otherwise, the war has no basis. Like, why did you just go and attack Iran if they weren't going to attack us? So they have to say, no, they were going to attack us and we wanted to attack first. Nobody believes that Iran was just going to the blue, attack the United States, and provoke a war that they obviously have been working very hard to prevent. Nobody was going to believe that. So then the question is, why would they attack us? And the only cogent, simple answer that Marco Rubio could have given was, oh, they were going to attack us because Israel was going to attack them. Meaning, we were forced into this war by what Israel was going to do. Go look at how Donald Trump talks to Europe and the leverage he knows he has by virtue of the fact that we spend so much on their defense, constantly badgering them and telling them what they can and can't do. Israel is 1,000 times more dependent on the United States, on our finances. We finance that country. We arm them. We go to war for them. We diplomatically protect them. Trump could have, in theory, just told Netanyahu, we're not going to war with Iran. We don't want a war with Iran. So, no, you cannot attack them because that will put our troops in harm's way, which is exactly what happened. 6 of them died in the first 24 hours. So the question is, why didn't Trump do that? And there's a lot of theories about it, but clearly he who is beholden to Netanyahu and Miriam Adelson and this whole crew that has become dominant.
The new year hits, and suddenly you might want new everything, including a new wardrobe. Does that resonate, ladies? Well, our sponsor, Daily Look, make wardrobe upgrade way too easy. Daily Look is the #1 rated premium personal styling service for women. With Daily Look, you get your own dedicated personal stylist to curate a box of clothes based on your body shape, preferences, and lifestyle. This is not an algorithm. This is a real personal stylist, and you get the same stylist every time. And when you head over to dailylook.com, you can use code Megan for 50% off your first order. That's 50% off with my code MEGN. Just fill out their style quiz and receive up to 12 hand-selected items delivered right to your home. Buy what you love, send back the rest. You will get free shipping both ways. Head to dailylook.com to take your style quiz and use the code Megan, 50% off your first order. That's dailylook.com for 50% off, and make sure you use my promo code Megan so they know we sent you. Home security can feel overwhelming, but Simply Safe makes it simple. Many people are choosing it for the peace of mind it provides, with over 4 million homes already protected. With no long-term contracts and anti-theft guarantee, it's easy to see why so many feel safer having Simply Safe in their lives. With 20 years of experience in home security, Simply Safe has consistently been recognized for excellence. They were named the best home security system of 2026 by U.S. News and World Report, and their customer service has been ranked the best in the industry. That's why so many homeowners feel safer and more secure with Simply Safe in their lives. Right now, you can get 50% off their new Simply Safe system at simplysafe.com/Megan. That's simplysafe.com/Megan. There's no safe like Simply Safe.
And the last thing I just want to quickly add, Megan, is Marco Rubio saying this is something we had to do. We had to eventually go to war with Iran. If that were true, why did Donald Trump throughout 2024, when he was running for president, let the American people know, hey, by the way, we're going to have to go to war with Iran at some point? He said the opposite. He did say we can't allow them to have a nuclear weapon, but a major war like this, sinking their navy, shattering their city, if somebody knew Trump had to do that, why was that hidden from the American people when he was running for president? That should have been something that should have been part of the plank of the Republican Party.
The IAEA, which does the inspections of the Iranian nuclear program, the Defense Intelligence Agency here in America, reportedly both had been saying Iran is not anywhere near getting a nuclear weapon, and is not short than 10 years away from getting a ballistic missile that could hit the United States. So they were telling the intelligence that President Trump was getting was saying there is not an imminent attack, there is not a rebuilding of the nuclear program, there is only an ambition, the desire by the Iranians to do it. I don't know when we've ever launched war based on desire, like an unfulfilled esoteric desire. This is why it's also extraordinary. And yet it seems to me that they saw you take out the Ayatollah, who's a bad guy and Israel hated. And Bibi Netanyahu made very clear for those 40 years and during his 7 visits to the White House, this is undisputed, that he wanted to launch a war against Iran and that he was pressuring President Trump to help. He wanted the United States to help, and he knew he could get our blessing, and we decided to go along with it pretty late in the game, according to all reports. So to me, that's why it's all of it makes very clear this was a Netanyahu-inspired action. He wanted it, and he talked our president into, because let's face it, Iran's not been warm and fuzzy towards the United States, and they've committed multiple sins against us in Iraq and elsewhere, and we're kind of pissed. We don't fucking like Iran, and the Ayatollahs killed a lot of Americans. So it's like there's been simmering, building resentment for years. That's not why you launch a hot war out of the blue when you've run on not launching wars. That's why I see it.
2 months before the last attack on Iran by the United States and Israel last year in June of 2025, 2 months before that, Tulsi Gabbard, Director of National Intelligence, the person whose job it is to understand and coordinate and summarize the intelligence for President Trump, went before the Senate and testified under oath that the consensus of the intelligence agencies is that the Iranian government had not made any decision to try and acquire a nuclear weapon. That first thing, that was the intelligence. And then when they asked Trump about it, he was like, I don't care what she says. Very similar to how Dick Cheney was told by the CIA that that Saddam Hussein doesn't have a WMD. And he just said, I don't care what you say, and created his own kind of alternative world that justified the war. And then the second thing is, why would Iran want a nuclear weapon? The reason, Megan, is like, look at the countries we attack and look at the countries we don't attack. We've been told forever that North Korea is run by crazy, insane, fanatical people. We don't go and attack them. Why not? Because they have nuclear weapons. Countries with nuclear weapons don't get messed with. We've created a world where people understand if you don't have nuclear weapons, you're liable at any moment to get attacked by the United States. Or if you have nuclear weapons, you're all safe and secure. We've created a world where every country is incentivized to get them, and that is a dangerous signal to send to the world.
Well, just yesterday we saw an announcement from Poland that they are now going to be pursuing a nuclear weapon. And so, it is kind of scary to think, we're allies with Poland, obviously, and they're NATO. But the question is, how many more are now going to say, I'm getting one. I don't care what you think. Mark Levin, very, very happy, almost as happy as Lindsey Graham over this whole thing. And taking issue with the remarks, I made them, many other people made, that we're angry about those 6 dead American servicemen and women. We're angry. And we don't feel that they needed to die, and that they died in a war that was for Israel, not for us. This is a war that was for Israel. It was at Israel's behest, and which was unnecessary. This was not a defensive action. Iran was not attacking us. It was not like when we went after the Taliban after 9/11 and Al-Qaeda. I mean, we had been attacked. It was a massive provocation, and no one would reasonably dispute that we had the right to defend ourselves, which is why so many countries came to fight with us. That plus the NATO obligation. Anyway, here's Mark Levin yesterday.
But the battle against the Iranian regime, the purpose is to protect the American people, protect our armed forces, protect the homeland, allies, protect tens of thousands of people from being slaughtered, who've been slaughtered. And yes, retribution, to make it clear that you don't get to do that to us for half a century without any effective response. So, of course, if we lose heroes, and we lost 3, there may be born, the president says likely so, because it's a massive military operation. It's a terrible thing. They gave their lives. They gave their lives for a great cause.
A great cause. Frank Gaffney was on with Steve Bannon 2 days ago saying it's basically cost-free. He's like, I know some service personnel died, but this is basically cost-free to us. So, great cause, cost-free. Your thoughts?
Kind of was taboo to talk about the fact that U.S. foreign policy is driven by Israel and people who in the United States view Israel as their most sacred cause. Even in private have long said that. I mean, there's tapes of Richard Nixon going back, and Barry Goldwater said it, and you go on and on. But in public, nobody was allowed to say it. And so the problem is that we created this climate where a major fact about our foreign policy and about the war we fight was banned, basically, because you would stand accused of bigotry and racism and anti-Semitism if you said that. Thankfully, that taboo is now broken, though they're desperately trying to maintain it. And I think the main reason is, of course they are. They're desperate. But it's done. They don't. There's too much because of independent media, too many sources of information, and it's like the left found out. If you overuse the racism accusation or misogyny or homophobia, you drive it into the point of meaninglessness, and nobody cares anymore. And that's the same as they found with anti-Semitism. If everybody is anti-Semite, it basically now means nothing. They've trivialized the term. Mm-hmm. The reality is that Israel pours huge amounts of money into our political system. Right now, they're spending, tens of millions of dollars, Miriam Adelson on down, to remove Thomas Massie from the Congress in one single Kentucky congressional district because of his opposition to the U.S. financing and arming Israel. They've succeeded in doing that to many other people. People are petrified of the Israel lobby, and that has been a reason why we've been so willing to send our troops into the Middle East to die for Israel. In fact, Megan, during the bombardment of Gaza and then some exchange of missiles, we deployed our own troops to go defend Israel. And there were people on military bases who died, American soldiers, during that time. They definitely died for Israel. And we were supposed to get out of the Middle East. For so long, the U.S. security state was saying, we need to pivot to Asia. We no longer have vital interests in the Middle East. What are our vital interests in the Middle East? Oil? We have so much oil. Those countries will happily provide us oil. We control Venezuelans' oil. Oil is not a vital interest. We've long been told China's our main adversary. Pivot to Asia, and yet we can't extricate ourselves from the Middle East, and the reason is for Israel. And as we're spending billions and billions and billions on these wars, look at what China is doing. They don't fight. They haven't fought a war since 1979 because they know how self-destructive they are.
Yeah, but I'm sure they're building up their interceptors and their military as quietly, steadily, throwing money at that problem while we're over here spending all of ours for a war that benefits a foreign country, a country of 9 million people, not the country of 350 million people. I mean, that's why the Daily Mail has a poll out today talking about where the president's numbers are right now in the wake of this, and it's not good. And this is just months before we have the midterms, where it shows President Trump down 4 points just since Friday. They say that he's at 44%, 4 points since Friday, marking the lowest rating recorded in Daily Mail tracking to date. Only 24% of voters believe killing Iran's supreme leader will make Americans safer. 55% claim the risk of terror attacks on U.S. soil has gone up because of these. 40% of voters say their view of Trump has become more negative in the last week, compared to 26% their opinion of him has improved. And obviously, when asked what the main reason was, their view had worsened. 59% cited the war with prices are too high, and now he started a war, said one respondent. So, I mean, that's the real thing. Like, to me, it's amazing to me. I've gone through this whole crazy thing in the past, I don't know, since last July. I made one comment about whether Epstein might have been an asset for the Mossad, and people started calling me an anti-Semite after being ardently pro-Israel and very, very defensive, as I remain, of American Jews. And I was like, what's happened here? Why? Whoa. Like, they know I'm not an anti-Semite. They know that I'm not, for sure. They know that. So why are they unleashing that term against me? And then Charlie was murdered, and the discussion came up about what his feelings were on Israel, and you weren't allowed to even raise that. And I had a conversation with Charlie in August, a month before he was killed.
I hope people go watch that. People should go watch that if you haven't seen it.
It was an incredible 30-minute exchange we had. That wasn't the agenda. When you're coming on the show, we'll give you a couple of a little outline, we'll probably hit these 5 topics if you want to know up. And we had done that for Charlie too, and we had not given Charlie anything about Israel. It was still resonating with me. We were both still reeling because we were anti-Semites, and he was so pro-Israel too. And we were both pissed. It was like, what the fuck? This is bullshit. And we had a long talk about it. And then from that point forward, it's just been nonstop with you're an anti-Semite, you have to defriend Tucker, you have to speak out about this person or that person and their commentary. And I've been saying all along, I'm responsible for my own commentary. I have no obligation to defriend anyone. And by the way, I don't believe Tucker's an anti-Semite. And I'm responsible for the words that out of my mouth. And that's it, period. It's been nonstop. And now, honestly, Glenn, I can barely go on X because I get trolled so heavily by the pro-Israel crowd and the Israel First crowd, and then the bots. There are many, many bots on X that, are part of an operation. And then there are many, many live humans on X who actually get $7,000 a tweet. People have come out and admitted it from the Israelis to troll anybody who deviates from the party line. And so, I want the audience to understand that this is happening, and it's an effort by a foreign country to silence the views of American about American foreign policy. That is fucked up. That's not okay. It's one thing that regular Americans say, I disagree with you on this. That's fine. We should all be doing that. It's quite another to have a foreign country actively interfering online to silence American voices about its interference in our affairs and the lives of our American service personnel.
Megan, I grew up in a overwhelmingly Jewish subculture. Everyone in my family is Jewish, friends, etc. Went to Jewish camp every year for the summer. there is anti-Semitism in the world, like there's racism, like there is everything else, and it has manifested in dangerous ways. But you can smell it. You can sense it. I know Tucker extremely well. Hours and hours and hours in front of the camera, out of the camera, talking to him. I know you well. And when you see people who you know aren't even, I mean, Megan, you and I have fought on this very show where you were defending Israel, or more so like the expulsion of anti-Israel protesters on the anti-Semitism.
Yes.
And this is like you for forever, have been a stalwart defender of Israel, and so was Charlie. Simply because you both started asking questions about, wait a minute, is this war really in our interest? Is this really Israel or undue influence? They don't tolerate that debate, and they start shutting it down by calling you a bigot and a racist. And when you have the self-possession to know you're not that, you will not be, bullied by it. You will not be told that you can't speak about your own country and our government's policies. And by doing that, they really have trivialized anti-Semitism, which has long been one of the big dangers, because it's supposed to pack a punch. Like, you're supposed to not want to call an anti-Semite publicly, but they've so cynically exploited it into a weapon to force you to pledge loyalty to Israel, just like the left did with the racism accusation, as I said, that it's completely drained it of all its meaning. And they've done more than anybody else now, not to open up what has long been necessary, which is this very serious debate about how much we do for Israel and why, but also they've opened up this world where, people don't care anymore about standing accused of that accusation, because people see how cynically it's wielded against people who so blatantly are far, far from anything that is recognizable as anti-Semitism. Now, I'm so relieved to see you and Tucker and Charlie before he was murdered, and a lot of other people on the right, Thomas Massey, Roger Charlie Green. You're right. Benjamin Netanyahu says controlling the message on social media, combating anti-Israel sentiment on social media is one of the most important battles that the Israelis have in their war. And they've done a lot to regain control of social media, including taking TikTok away and giving it to the Ellison family, and doing a lot on X as well. But it's so much, as somebody who's been criticizing Israel and arguing about this for a long time, it's so much better now than it ever has been that finally we get to have this made out in the open, to the point where there's a New York Times article this morning saying that Trump battles the perception of his own base that this war was for Israel. That was unthinkable even 5 years ago.
I will say this, in real life, which is not X, I have so many people stop me, Jewish Americans, saying, this is such bullshit. We know you're not an Semite. Please don't listen to these rabid, folks online. They don't speak for us. And I know that. But it is amazing to me just to watch the bullying happen, where like they all pile in. And I've even noticed that if I put out a tweet that's critical of Israel, or even my, or like whatever, Lindsey Graham, I'll get completely trolled on my tweet. But if somebody who's not considered an Israeli ally, more open in their criticisms of Israel, if they retweet the tweet, it's a very different response. Like they're not, I don't know if you are or not, but like a lot of the people who would retweet something, I would tweet along these lines, they're not actively getting trolled anymore, never were. Maybe they're people like me who they considered a strong ally, who they think might be waffling. They reserve a particular ire for people like that, in the same way that, like, if you were a Democrat and you turn on the Democrats, they really pile on you, like you've betrayed them. You're supposed to be on their team and you didn't, you aren't any longer. And I'll tell you what, it's like, I'm allowed to have questions about Israel. I haven't been ardently defensive of Israel, for my career, but in general, as you and I have talked about before, I'm not like huge on foreign policy. Right. And I'm mildly supportive of Israel in general, and certainly after 10/7, very defensive of Israel's right to defend itself fully, and really just didn't pay that much attention to the day-to-day conduct of the war, all the terrible headlines. My biggest struggle over the past couple of years has been, who do I trust on information, on the toll, on who's getting, what I mean? It's like, Hamas is a propaganda artist, and now what I see is so is Israel. So is Israel. Like, they are absolutely working and paying to manipulate public opinion in the United States as we speak. So I no longer trust them when it comes to messaging either. And I will not be silenced by bullies of any kind, whether it's BLM bullies, whether it's leftist bullies, whether, the people who tried to cancel me after Trump and I had that debate bullies. whether it's Vladimir Putin, I will not be silenced by these bullies. I don't
And you
care.
warned them.
I will
You
continue
warned them.
going
You
on
warned
X and
them
posting.
ahead of time. You said, if you think this is going to silence me, it's going to have the opposite effect. Charlie said the same thing. I didn't mean to suggest you were some like hardcore Israel crusader. Just that, you know, on foreign policy, you worked at Fox. I think you were generally supportive of the war on terror mindset was a question. You were never somebody,
Very much.
I guess I just mean that you were never somebody who was like an Israel critic. And even on October 7th, as you just recounted, and I know for this personally, you were somebody who was mostly sympathizing with Israel. They had been attacked, was your view, and these protesters were anti-Semitic. And to watch them basically pick you up and Charlie up and Tucker as well, and basically turn you into anti-Semites just simply for expressing some questions or doubts you have every, not just the right, but the obligation to do as American journalists, as American citizens. It's disgusting. It's as despicable to me as what the left did when they accused people of being racist or otherwise bigoted without any basis whatsoever. And it's creating the same it's exactly the same mentality. It's exactly the same tactic.
Thankfully, I have experience there too, and I was swept up in that as well. Like I've been called all the things, so I'm used to things. It's not pleasant, but you can't let it silence you. I worry more about like their citizens who are having the same doubts I am and experience this kind of blowback in their own personal lives, and don't maybe have a platform and don't have like a daily reassurance in terms whatever. There's their ability to go out there and keep doing their job, that they're secure, and so this like it has to stop, and we have to speak out about it. I still support President Trump fully. I am completely rooting for our success in what is clearly a war. I am 100% rooting for our troops, but I'd like it to end. I'd like it to end ASAP so we can minimize the loss of human life and go back to worrying about our own citizens. Glenn Greenwald, thank you. Thank you for always being a
Always
truth
great to
teller.
see you,
Love
Megan.
having you on. We're back tomorrow with the pastor who was interrupted by Don Lemon.
I was driving, and that's when I was hit my hands. That's where I was feeling the most pain. My hands are my voice. Morgan got involved. It was great. When I got my settlement, I was amazed. I was not expecting this kind of experience.
It's time to earn double points when you get treated with germ filler and Botox Cosmetic at the same visit. Terms and conditions apply.
Why do you think last night in the 2-hour sundowning rambling that you heard for Donald Trump, you didn't hear the word Epstein once?
You're a lawyer. How, I'm trying to find the technical term, freaky is this Department of Justice?
It's the members of Congress problem. They're the ones that are failing to not use their power in the way it's supposed to be.
The Supreme Court can issue as many rules they want. Who's going to enforce it if you have a president who says, no thanks?
Republicans, I think, are racist to put a Hispanic in the office, no matter how white Marco tries to pretend to be. Democrats have the dog finally catching the car moment in November.
There's no such thing as going to be a forever term.
I think you're going to see a legitimate let them eat cake Marie Antoinette moment.
Many people thought that the United States had guardrails to protect it from a president like Donald Trump. Many people were wrong. Since Trump began his second term, he has shown time and time again how, from his perspective, laws are his suggestions, lawmakers are pawns, and he is above both. Here to explain just how true or untrue that is attorney, legal analyst, former MSNBC anchor, now YouTube star Katie Phang, who now hosts Katie Phang News on YouTube. As a lawyer, Katie has trialed both civil and criminal cases, and we're going to take some of that experience and use it here on set. How are you? Long time no see.
I love this reunion.
This is a great reunion.
This is
We
like
love the
long
former cable,
overdue.
independent journalism, freedom space. How are you feeling? Let's start there. How are you feeling to be free in an era of Trump and assaults on the media, that you are on YouTube building your own audience, your own thing?
It's absolutely necessary. The idea of being, it's Katie Unleashed, the idea of not having a producer whispering in my ear, either hurry up and wrap because we're live, because he can't get into the meat of anything, or having somebody say, why do you call him convicted felon every time you say his name? Because he's like, I'm not quite sure why not. But all kidding aside, I have been saying part of the reason why we do what we do in independent journalism is you have to meet the urgency of the moment with the urgency of the message. And I don't think people want to hear the platitudes. I don't think people want to sit there and hear it be filtered or tempered in any way. I think they either want you to match their energy, their anger, their frustration, their fear, because if not, then where's that relatability? Like, I don't think it exists. And so I'm grateful that the universe said, we're going to dick you over, but then make sure you're going to be okay.
I think I'm in the same boat. I think I feel the same way.
You were like the frontiers. You were like the pioneer.
I tried.
Here.
And since then, we've had Jim Acosta and Joy Reid and your good self and others. I think. Look, you've noticed what we've noticed, which is the audience wants authenticity. The audience wants someone to legitimately channel their legitimate rage at what is going on.
They don't want performative
and
rage.
They don't want to be patronised
by
people telling them that Donald Trump somehow isn't a convicted felon or should be called a fascist or a liar. I mean, let's just take the State of the Union. Tuesday night, Donald Trump gave the longest State of the Union in American history, a snooze fest, but also, as my colleague Swin Soup sang, called a Klan rally in Congress. Said some racist shit.
A little January 6th, 2021 channel.
He did the election denialism. He attacked Somalis. He talked about foreign cultures.
His greatest hits, apparently.
His greatest hits. What did you make of it? I thought he was a little low energy.
Yes, I expected to be a little bit more unhinged. And in full disclosure, I watched it after it happened. I did not watch it in real time because we did.
An alternative rally.
We had our counter programming right across the street on the National Mall, so I did not have to suffer through it in real time. But I will admit that I did watch it thereafter. I also watched his prior 3 union addresses in preparation for said State of the Union address last night. Look, I'm going to continuously borrow from our former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi when she ripped up her copy of his State of the Union address. He said it's a manifesto of mistruths.
Yeah.
That's all it is. That's all it's going to be. But it was very campaign rally-esque. I actually don't take as much umbrage with Trump anymore because he's so freaking predictable. I take umbrage with all of the enablers.
Yes.
This jumping to your feet to applaud.
Troy Neal saying, sign my tie. You see that? Just do it
initially. Why didn't he just open his chest and be like, sign
Donald
my
Trump's
boot?
picture on it.
Yeah.
And he asked him to sign it.
No, and
Grown man.
I felt like Mike Johnson, like you wanted to wipe the drool out of the corner of his mouth.
Yes.
Like that type. And J.D. Vance, what he deigned to return from his family trip to Italy. He felt like it was important to be there for that. God forbid we interrupt.
It was a great
your
moment when Trump praised Marco Rubio and J.D. Vance had to stand and sit through that.
Marco, which job did Trump praise Marco for? Because Marco has enough jobs to sustain the American economy.
Do you buy that the next Republican presidential candidate will be either J.D. Vance or Marco Rubio?
No. I don't think Republicans, I think they're too racist to put a Hispanic in the office, no matter how white Marco tries to pretend to be. J.D. Vance's very incestuous relationship with the tech bros and stuff, they can only buy elections so far. Okay. And I think we've seen when you actually insert the Elon Musk and other into this environment, they can't even stand the swamp.
Yeah, it backfires. So you got Trump. I mean, my worry is Trump in 2028, or there won't be an election in 2028. I mean, that's
very credible.
That's still the very credible real thing he keeps bringing up.
He brought up voter fraud last night.
Well, he also said this should be my third term. The man keeps constantly talking in terms of third term. There's no such thing as a third term.
He did the Fulton County raid on the search warrant executed down there.
It always worries me when people say, is he going to have a third term? There's no such thing as a third term. It'll be a forever term. There's no way he does a third term.
It's very Putin.
There's no scenario he does extra unconstitutional years and says, okay, I'm done. If he doesn't go in 28, he's not going ever. Right? That's the simple truth of the matter.
Oh, I think if he doesn't go in 28, I don't think you're going to see judicial intervention. I think some people will go that route, which is still credible and I support because I'm very much rules and norms and institutions girl. But I also think you're going to see a legitimate let them eat cake Marie Antoinette moment. I'm not kidding.
So on that note then, good, because I want to talk to you about the Supreme Court's big tariffs disaster where they shut down.
Kudos to them.
They did 6-3.
And they rolled into that State of the Union yesterday.
Some of them did, yes.
And John Roberts looked horrified, but yes, he was there.
John Roberts, Chief Justice, he voted against, and obviously the 2 Trump appointees, 2 of the 3, Gorsuch and Amy Coney Barrett.
Yes.
So my question then is, Scott Jennings, who I refer to as the annoying man on television, he said the other night with the typical smirk on his face that, look, this rule proves that the court is independent. Democrats keep calling the Supreme Court Trump's lapdog, but look, they ruled against him. What's your argument in response to people who say this proves that they're independent? Liking this video? And don't just watch. Hit like, share, and subscribe. And tap the bell so you never miss a video or live show. But if you want early access